It is never easy when a franchise decides to create a spin-off game in a different genre. So when the Gears franchise in 2020 decided to release a Gears of War game that was turn-based tactics, similar to XCOM, it raised a lot of questions because Gears Tactics was completely unexpected, but at the same time, it made complete sense. It's not hard to imagine Gears of War's more cover-based gameplay transitioning into a turn-based tactics gameplay. But just because in theory a game should work in a new genre, it does not mean it is immediately worth playing. So what about Gears Tactics then? In short, it gets so much of the fundamental aesthetics and gameplay mechanics right, while lacking a lot of the map/mission diversity and late game depth. Fundamentally, Gears Tactics attempts to create a spin-off game that shifts gears and introduces new fans to the franchise. But before you decide if it's the game for you, let's get into a little bit more detail.
We've got 2 sites to hold down. Move out!
So let's get into what Gears Tactics is. For people who haven't played XCOM or similar game before, Gears Tactics is a turn-based tactics game. In the game, you control a squad of up to 4 to 5 soldiers, and they complete missions on a small map. Since the game is turn-based, only one team can make actions at a time, and each character at the start only has 3 action points. Actions involve anything that your character can do, so this means you'll spend your 3 action points for each character on moving them around the tile system, shooting, melee, grenades, character abilities, and the completely overpowered Overwatch ability. So the general breakdown of the game is, you complete missions with a small customizable squad on a turn-based map. And, like the name of the genre, and also the game implies, tactics play a huge part of the game as your troops have a limited field of view and limited action points. This forces you to constantly analyze every potential move and continuously factor the amount of action points you have left. You not only spend your action points on combat, you also need to spend it on reloading your weapons and making sure your troops are behind cover. This is because enemies can do massive damage to units who are standing out in the open. But love it or hate it, the game also uses RNG to calculate your shots. This is calculated by the weapon type, distance, and how clear of a line of sight you have on your enemy. For those of you unfamiliar with turn-based tactics games, this creates some of the best and worst moments of gaming. You'll never forget the times that your troops are literally face to face against an enemy and miss their shots. But that's what makes each encounter that little bit more different, by inserting a little bit of luck. But now let's get into some of the Gears Tactics gameplay.
Well, at least we'll hear it coming.
The one part that Gears Tactics absolutely got right is the aesthetic and overall setting of what made Gears of War such a popular franchise. They've done an amazing job on the graphics, character design, and combat animation. Seeing the impact of grenades going off and the signature chainsaw kills makes this game a spin-off that shows that the developers were right in their choice of genre. The reason I bring this up for gameplay is because Gears Tactics gameplay takes a lot of inspiration from the franchise. So this means a focus on being behind cover and using grenades that are almost mandatory to finish some missions, and an emphasis on more aggressive strategies through the ability to nearly instantly melee kill most enemies. Another major part of the game design that promotes aggressive gameplay is the implementation of giving soldiers 3 action points instead of the 2. This allows for more opportunities to attack the enemy. These little details help make the combat feel aligned with the Gears of War setting. However, one major point of difference is at times, Gears Tactics feels like it should have been called Gears Overwatch. This is because of how overpowered the in-game ability of Overwatch is. So, in the game, all your soldiers have an ability called Overwatch. This lets you spend your action points on having one of your soldiers set up position and face their weapon over a certain coned area. This ability means that during the enemy turn, if they move or any action within that area, they'll be shot and you'll interrupt them. So at the surface, the Overwatch ability makes sense. It allows you to think tactically and set up ambushes. Also makes you focus on soldier placement because friendly fire is turned on, and this means you can easily overlap your unit's Overwatch area and do more harm than good. But you should be aware that Overwatch is extremely powerful in Gears Tactics to the point of being mandatory. It just means it is a core part of the overall gameplay of the battles. At times, it can be exciting to have your troops slowly move from cover to cover and using the Overwatch ability to make sure they each have each other's backs. And it's so rewarding to see the perfect Overwatch ambush take out waves and waves of enemies as they try to rush your position. But you just need to be aware that this is a core aspect of the experience. Also, another part of the gameplay is that players may either love or hate that the game's constant enemy spawns and force returning to the vehicle to finish the mission. So depending on the mission, the game will continuously drop enemies all around you. This forces you to constantly keep moving as enemies can spawn from behind. Some missions will also force you to backtrack to the map's starting point to extract. So while this makes sense to the story, this becomes a bigger issue later on in the campaign. But I'll explain that a little bit later. But for now, let's get into the campaign.
Gonna guess that doesn't say free kittens.
Now that we've talked about the missions, let's get into the overall campaign and other features of the game. So Gears Tactics is a single player game that focuses on the campaign and veteran missions. Anyone new to the franchise, you do not need to have played previous games to have a general understanding of the story. The game's cutscenes between main missions do a good job of generally keeping up to date of what is happening. So for example, The story starts off with a soldier who has a mysterious past and got demoted to live a quieter life. But what is this? An even older and more mysterious soldier enters the scene, and he has a mission from the very top that only you can complete. And what is this mission? Well, it involves you taking out the villain of the week. So while this story will keep you interested, it's probably something you've seen before. So the story aside, Gears Tactics campaign is split into two main sections. There is the team-based battles we discussed before, and then there's the home mission / barracks menu that you use between missions. So in this menu, you get to focus on the RPG aspects of the game. It's where you open up gear boxes, you can customize and modify your soldiers, equipment and weapons, and you can upgrade your soldier's skill tree. Like any good RPG, the game has customizable soldiers. There is a handful of characters that you need to play for the story. However, you also recruit soldiers from roster to help fill up your party. And just like the story characters, these soldiers will be from one of the game's 6 unique classes, and each class has their own unique weapon and skill tree. This means they have their own positives and negatives. This is important to note as you'll need to decide on the best class types for the mission and your squad composition. So for example, the support class gives you a range of healing abilities to help get you out of sticky situations, while a sniper can be essential in providing long range cover, so your heavy soldier can get into the battle and set up a defensive position. The game does an amazing job of making every class bring something different to your squad, but ultimately, the home screen between missions is about fine tuning and making the best team composition before each mission. It is also where you'll be leveling up and upgrading your soldiers' class skills, and equipping and modifying the gear that best suits your playstyle for the squad's needs. So this system allows you to spend time fine-tuning every little detail of your squads while being simple enough to allow you to quickly just equip new gear and move on to the next mission. So since the game's main modes are the campaign and some veteran missions you can complete afterwards, the longevity of the game comes from how much you enjoy the customizing your squad and the battles. But like I mentioned before, the game's combat and aesthetics make this experience worthwhile for fans of the franchise. However, the mission design and the maps can be a major issue for the game's replayability. So the game's campaign can be finished in roughly 20 to 30 hours, and honestly, it probably should have been a lot shorter. At first, the map design felt in place with the Gears of War universe and setting. The maps allowed for multiple positions of cover and stayed true to the war-ruined setting of the universe. Also, the design of enemy units and boss fights were unique with their own mechanics that force you to change your playstyle. But issue with missions comes down to the requirement of side missions. So instead of having more main story missions, the game forces the player at random points to complete side missions. These missions are the same handful of objectives on the same map you've already played during the story chapters. So as the story progresses, so does the amount of side missions you need to complete. By the last chapter of the game, I was forced to complete 3 side missions, 1 story mission, and then another 3 side missions. That were the same modes that I've already played a dozen times before. And I couldn't skip these missions. I would have preferred more story missions or incentives to play these side missions other than just getting more gear. It is not a great feeling to play a campaign and get close to the end of the story and then run to multiple side mission roadblocks. Now these can especially feel like roadblocks when some missions restrict what characters you can use and other side missions will even restrict your squad size. While occasionally these restrictions provide a nice change of pace, it begins happening frequently enough to stop the momentum of the story, and by the end of the game, it's hard not to think how different an experience Gears Tactics would be without 4 side missions. But overall, I still enjoyed the story for what it was, and depending on how well the combat and setting interest you, will depend on how much these compulsory side missions will impact your playthrough. Ultimately, when it comes to turn-based tactics games, Gears Tactics does an excellent job of creating a unique experience in the genre that lives up to the Gears of War franchise. Its combat and gameplay choices make it a game that doesn't feel like a copy of other games. It feels like a solid alternative. The game's performance on console worked great, and I rarely ran into any major issues. And while the game's side missions and map design may not be for everyone, Gears Tactics' core combat gameplay provided a unique experience. So, if you're a fan of the Gears of War franchise, or you're looking for a turn-based tactics game that is similar to XCOM but different enough to stand up on its own, then this might be the game for you. Thank you for listening and please subscribe.